Welcome back. You're listening to the Voice of Russia in London. I'm James Reinl with a special show on perennially troubled Somalia. And the clock is ticking for the Horn of Africa nation. In August, the mandate for the country's Western-backed leadership, the transitional federal government, expires. Its record is unimpressive. The unelected TFG controls little beyond the capital, Mogadishu, and there only thanks to African Union troops. Much of the south and central region is under al-Shabaab, a group of al-Qaeda-linked Islamists. Much of the north has broken from the capital. A third of Somalia's 9.1 million people need emergency aid. Some 2.5 million are refugees, both in Somalia and abroad, following years of drought and conflict. Unemployment and poverty drive young men to launch pirate raids on vessels off Somalia's lawless coast, now a multi-billion-dollar business that has drawn in the world's navies. Against this backdrop, Britain is hosting a conference this week aimed at stabilising a country that has lacked a central government since 1991. So, will the London meeting be just another in a long series of Somalia talking shops? Is the British Foreign Minister, William Hague, correct that recent political and security gains in Somalia offer a window of opportunity for more substantial improvements over the long term? Should we abandon the corrupt politicians in Mogadishu and look instead to the semi-autonomous regions of Somaliland and Puntland, or even a deal with al-Shabaab? To probe these questions, we're hosting a debate in our London studios. I'm joined by the Somali journalist Abdullahi Haji, Mary Harper, author of Getting Somalia Wrong, Nuradin Dirie, an independent analyst, and over the phone from Oxford, David Anderson, an Africa expert at the university there. So, Abdullahi, first question to you. William Hague is pretty hopeful about the conference this week. What can you say about the recent gains in Somalia that inspire this confidence?
The Somali government, with the help of the African Union troops and others, have been trying to push al-Shabaab and their friends from the capital Mogadishu. And now most of the capital is under the control of the government. And the AMISOM troops have started recently some sort of push towards outside the capital in order to get rid of al-Shabaab. But the menace is still there, and the al-Shabaab are still exploding bombs in the capital, killing people from time to time. And they are saying that although they have withdrawn from the capital on their own initiative, they are not finished yet, and they will be continuing to fight. And now the thing is, how long will this fight will continue? Because al-Shabaab, as you just put it, controls at least 8 of the most fertile regions in Somalia. And the Kenyan troops who have been trying to push al-Shabaab from southern regions, including Kismayo and all that area, are not very successful at all. They were pinned down, on the border. And the Kenyans have been using some fighter planes, bombing some villages where there were no al-Shabaab at all. Now, the hope which not only William Hague but the Prime Minister David Cameron expressed is genuine, I will say, because 4 or 5 months ago, the Prime Minister made a statement in which he said that his government were organizing a very big conference in London, which is taking place on Thursday, saying that the aim of this conference was to try to restore peace and hope to Somalia. And he added that there will be 2 important issues which they will be discussing at the conference. A, how to eliminate once and for all the militant Islamic group al-Shabaab from Somalia. Because he said this was a threat not only to Somalia and to East Africa, but to Britain as well. B, how to eliminate piracy in northeast part of Somalia, which gets assistance and help from al-Shabaab and other people living in that part of Somalia. So these are the 2 most important issues which the conference will be concentrating.
Nuradin, I want you to pick up on a couple of the points that Abdullahi is raising there. He's saying that this conference is dealing with defeating al-Shabaab and tackling piracy. But from my point of view, there's nothing new. People have been talking about this for a long time, and they're obviously the key security issues facing Somalia. What are you expecting? What are you hoping for on Thursday?
You're right, this is not new, but it cannot go on forever. And I think the key aim of the conference is to coordinate the international response to Somalia and to get the international community better coordinate what they're trying to do for Somalia, because the international community are in a situation where the right hand is not speaking to the far right hand. And I think it is better to coordinate whatever they're trying to do for Somalia. If that could be achieved, I think it's very hopeful. It will be an opportunity for Somalia to get its act together. But in terms of the politics of Somalia, all the time, it depends on the Somali people, how they get together and how they move forward. In terms of the international interest on piracy and security issue, there is no doubt that security issues emanating from Somalia is a threat to the region. It is first and foremost a threat to the Somali people, but it can go also far beyond the region as well. And that's why the international community are coming together and saying, how can we facilitate a political fix for Somalia, which ultimately can do something about the piracy, which can do something about the humanitarian situations, which also can do something about the security issues.
Mary, in your book, you wrote about a fixation with lengthy and expensive international peace conferences on Somalia. So I'm guessing you're not totally convinced about this week's powwow in London, no?
Well, I started off being extremely sceptical because there's been almost 20 international conferences on Somalia in the past 21 years, and none of them have achieved anything useful for Somalia or anywhere else. But I have changed my mind. I think that the British, number one, they lack arrogance, and I think that's really important. I think they're really engaging with, listening to and learning from Somalis from all different communities. As Nuradin said, they're not really trying to sort out Somalia's internal problems. This is more about coordinating the international approach towards Somalia. So I don't think that they're being foolish in holding this conference. I'm impressed that they've now managed to get about 56, 57 world leaders to attend, which shows that the world really does care about Somalia, whether because it's afraid of Somalia or because it doesn't like the fact that in the 21st century that was the country that has had the first famine. But having said that, who knows if after a Thursday evening and everyone starts packing their bags and goes home, is anything going to change on the ground in Somalia? That is what really matters.
David, I want to put that one over to you. What does happen after everyone's packed their bags and left on Thursday evening?
Well, I think that the British government has a very clear notion of what they're trying to achieve. I think they want to get a concerned group of countries who will, over the next 5 to 10 years, I think this is quite a long horizon, over the next 5 to 10 years, these countries will take a guiding interest in what is happening in Somalia. But I think we should ask perhaps one or two deeper questions about what is the intended outcome of this process, what is the exit strategy going to be, and that does raise some interesting issues. I feel that the British are motivated by a positive desire to see Somalia's problems solved, but I do feel that they would much rather that at the end of the day there was one Somalia reformed, not several, and that raises some interesting questions about the future of Somaliland and perhaps also Puntland. And it also raises interesting questions about how far Somalis themselves will be able to set the agenda for their constitutional and sovereign future. At this stage, that question may sound a little premature, but I'm sure that Somalis themselves will be very interested to know how they are going to participate actively in defining their own future.
Do you want to see the world in all of its diversity? Listen to one of the oldest radio stations in the world, the Voice of Russia, and you'll gain a comprehensive understanding of the most important world events.
You're listening to the Voice of Russia in London. I'm James Reinl, and we're hosting a debate on the way out of Somalia's chronic instability. I'm joined by the Somali journalist Abdullahi Haji, Mary Harper, author of Getting Somalia Wrong, Nuradin Dirie, an independent analyst, and David Anderson, an Africa expert at Oxford University. Abdullahi, when you were first talking, you were talking about military gains that have been made recently. You referred to the progress by the African Union troops kicking al-Shabaab out of Mogadishu. That's not to mention the joining of Kenyans in the south of the country and Ethiopians in the west. I'm asking you, could there be some kind of military breakthrough over the next few months, and what could that mean for the future of Somalia?
I think that will be really important to emphasize that both the Ethiopians and the Kenyans have been trying to push from some regions in Somalia. The Ethiopians from the northwest, central Somalia, like Hiran, and I was told, or it was stated, that the Ethiopians will soon be moving to two most important regions like Bai and Bakol, on the border with Ethiopia. And the Kenyans were supposed to push inside Somalia and squeeze the al-Shabaab in the middle. Now, the Ethiopians were saying that because of their bad experience in Somalia, 2005, 2007, that they do not want to come into Somalia and hold areas in Somalia. And they said they will clear al-Shabaab from those regions, central Somalia, and they will be very happy to hand over to the AMISOM troops. And the Kenyans have also stated that they will be part of the AMISOM, so that this coordinated effort by the AMISOM, the Ethiopians, and the Kenyans, and also more troops saying that they will be arriving soon in Somalia, I think this will make a very, very big difference. And it is quite clear that al-Shabaab or the pirates will not be able to have a free hand either in northeastern Somalia or in central and southern Somalia.
I'm not sure that I agree with Haji there, because even though there has been some progress made against Shabaab, principally in Mogadishu, if you travel 10 kilometers out of Mogadishu in any direction, you'll bump into al-Shabaab, and they still control the majority of the southern and central regions. And, there's been concerted efforts to get rid of al-Shabaab before. Americans have been bombing them. Ethiopians have been fighting them. Kenya's a newcomer. And al-Shabaab isn't the kind of force that you can just eliminate or defeat, because it vanishes into the community. It carries out suicide bombings. I just think I can't actually see how a military approach is going to defeat al-Shabaab. I don't think that that's the way to deal with it.
I agree with Mary, but in addition to that also, Al-Shabaab is not a one monolithic homogeneous group. I mean, there are groups and different interests ranging from very radical Islamist groups to clan affiliations and clan interests. And what is happening, I mean, I'm sure that the Al-Shabaab do not have the military clout to face traditional military hardware. But what is happening inside Somalia is a classic insurgency. And then insurgency, coupled with the clan system in Somalia, makes mockery of the arithmetic itself. For example, in a normal situation, if you have 10 insurgents and you kill 6 of them, you have 4 more to go. But all the 6 you killed in Somalia have 6 clans and 6 sub-clans. So you have another 300 to go. That's what happens in Somalia. Because all clan interests, if they really see that a specific forces are trying to squeeze a clan interest, they will fight against it. So what has failed in South Central Somalia is politics. It's not military. Of course, some very radical group have to be pressured. But I think the current president, the whole reason why he was chosen or selected to become the president, because he was an Islamist, and we were hoping that he will make alliances and negotiations with different, moderate Islamist groups and clan interests, so that he can make politics work. But that's what's failed, and I think what Somalia needs in South Central Somalia is the politics to work.
I think I agree entirely with Nuradin that this is a political question, and it has to be defined on the ground by the participants themselves. I think that's absolutely critical. But I think what Cameron in the UK is trying to do, Prime Minister Cameron, is to look beyond the current struggle and to think about what Somalia's future might look like. And it's quite legitimate for us to ask, why should Britain care about that? Why should it matter? Well, I think it matters because Britain wants to take a lead in providing stability to this region. Kenya is a very close ally of Britain. The British Army has a big training base in Kenya. It's a very important country for Britain. Also, Ethiopia is one of the largest recipients in the world of British aid through our Department for International Development. So again, Britain is an interested party in this region. So they do have something at stake here. But what I think you're going to see on Thursday with the announcement is that Britain's going to try and put other countries into the foreground. So I think we'll see the Turks, the Qataris, maybe some other states from the Gulf area coming forward as part of a working group who are going to take a lead on Somali affairs. In other words, it won't just be Britain doing this, it'll be other intermediaries, and importantly, some of those countries will be Islamic countries. So I think this is a bold attempt to try and get the future planning of Somalia's politics onto a different level, to a different level of discussion that takes us above the current conflict and looking ahead to what kind of constitutional settlements might be made. But of course, the anticipation behind this is that al-Shabaab will be defeated. And Mary's already reminded us, very importantly, that that may be easier said than done.
Abdullahi, can you pick up on one of these points? Is what we see in Somalia with the al-Shabaab in any way comparable to something like the Taliban in Afghanistan, where for years you're fighting this kind of group, but in the end, what you have to do, you've got to go and sit down at the negotiating table and strike some political deal?
Al-Shabaab is not comparable to Taliban in Afghanistan. They had, some time ago, between 3,000 to 5,000 fighters. Of course, as Nuradin said, they are part and parcel of the clan division in Somalia. However, the British government, as I was saying earlier, did not want to get involved in Somalia very lightly. Remember, this civil war has been going on for 20 years. Britain, with the international community, particularly the European Union, the United Nations and the African Union, are determined now to get rid of al-Shabaab by force or by cajoling or by anything, and also the piracy. As long as there are these twin evils in al-Shabaab and in the piracy in northeastern Somalia, East Africa cannot be said is a safe place. You remember in Kenya, the al-Shabaab were said to have kidnapped several prominent people, and that has completely, undermined and, in fact, killed the tourist business in Kenya, which is the lifeline of the country. What I'm saying is Britain did not take this project very lightly. They know the cons and the pros. They know the problems. And with the help of the Americans in the background, and all these countries that I have mentioned, they are determined to restore peace and stability into Somalia, and after that to start some sort of reconstruction to the country. And remember, the 3 to 4 billion Somalis, almost half of the Somali nation, who are displaced, and most of them, living in abject poverty in refugee camps in Kenya and Ethiopia, is not something to watch and something to just ignore, forever. I am quite sure and convinced, although I don't know what this conference will yield, that these countries, Britain, the European Union, the United Nations, the African Union, they are determined to restore peace and stability to Somalia. Whatever other people may say. They say it is not possible militarily to defeat al-Shabaab. How many organizations, militant organizations, how many radical organizations have been eliminated as a result of, military operations? Of course, military operations and political are two important points that should go side by side.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm James Reinl, and we're hosting a debate on famine, piracy and instability in Somalia. I'm joined by the Somali journalist Abdullahi Haji, Mary Harper, author of Getting Somalia Wrong, the independent analyst Nuradin Dirie, and David Anderson, an Africa expert at Oxford University. Mary, I've been reading some of the stuff that you've been writing, and you suggest that it isn't all doom, gloom and disaster in Somalia. You point to a vibrant economy in the north of the country, good livestock sales going to the Gulf and the Arabian Peninsula. Should we be looking to these northern regions, the semi-autonomous regions of Somaliland and Puntland, as some kind of way forward for Somalia?
I mean, they do offer extraordinary models, in particular the self-declared Republic of Somaliland, which 20 years ago was the most destroyed part of Somalia, and then it broke away and in its own fashion built a political system that works and that has held 3 elections that are more democratic than any other in the Horn of Africa. But, you know, the example of Somaliland can't be emulated in the south. You know, that there's inspiration to be received from Somaliland and lessons, but the political complexion, the history, the clan structure of the South is different. So it would be oversimplifying things to say that Somaliland is the answer to Somalia's problems. I do wish that one group of people, that David Cameron had engaged one group of people a bit more enthusiastically, and that's the business community. I know they're not politicians, but they, even in the most hellish parts of Somalia, are functioning. I mean, Africa's biggest money transfer company is operating in areas controlled by Al-Shabaab. It's operating everywhere. And you think, well, if the business people know how to do that on a sort of global scale, a sophisticated scale, why can't the politicians learn how to work across all areas of Somalia?
Can I ask, because we're running out of time, if Nuradin or David would like to pick up there on Mary's point about business being the way forward? Politicians should emulate the free market principles which are seemingly working in Somalia.
I think it's a very important and crucial point. And I also, like Mary, I noted that the business community was not very well represented in the conference that's coming up. And that is going to be an issue because in order to get things to happen on the ground in Somalia, and perhaps especially in Mogadishu, you need the support of that business community because they have the vested interests in the city functioning and in the port functioning. And those are the things that will kickstart Somalia's recovery. Get markets to work again, get goods to flow again, get investment to work again, and the country will begin to recover. So I think this is a critical aspect that needs to be addressed. And I think it would be difficult to see a way forward if the business community is not engaged. But of course, the international community has had a bit of a problem with the money transfer business that Mary mentioned, in that they have worried that some of this money gets transferred into the wrong hands and is used to buy weapons rather than going towards development. So there are some issues and concerns that the international community has around that also need to be addressed.
Nuradin, I'm going to let you get back in one last time. Business could be the way forward, but of course, surely that's going to require good governance too?
I think it's not only business what's succeeding in Somalia. Business and private sector are succeeding, but also on political level, there are successes also. Somaliland, Puntland and other areas are also emerging. But also we have very vibrant civil society and also very, very dynamically engaged the diaspora. So I think as a concept, it's how we can protect and engage and encourage what's already succeeding, and then how we can protect from the political negative impacts that we might likely to get at the center of Somalia to disrupt whatever successes Somalia has achieved over the last 20 years. And also the lesson from here is that Somalis can achieve successes, they can do it for themselves. They are just normal people like anybody else in the world who are going under extraordinary circumstances.
That was Nuradin Dirie, the independent analyst, saying that he hopes this week's conference on Somalia will cement some of the gains that have been made in that troubled country. I was also joined by the Somali journalist Abdullahi Haji, Mary Harper, author of Getting Somalia Wrong, and over the phone, David Anderson, an Africa expert at Oxford University. You've been listening to The Voice of Russia. I'm James Reinl. Stay tuned. We'll be back shortly.